Hi, everybody. Thank you, Chanel. And thank you to NASDAQ. So as Chanel said, Kay is a rock star. So tell us how you got to where you are today.
Interesting question. I hail from Alabama, the state of Alabama, and started my studies. I was STEM before STEM was cool. My degree is in chemical engineering from the University of Alabama, and I knew that I wanted to understand how to do things, how to make things move and change, and I knew that at some point I wanted to run an enterprise. So that's how I started out, and once I progressed throughout Dow Chemical, that's where I started out my career. I said that at some point, when they're asking me to do something, and the only way I know how to do it is the Dow way, is when it's time for me to go and get my MBA. And when I got that assignment, I said, it's time to go. And I went to business school at Harvard, worked at McKinsey, and sort of did all these fabulous things in nonprofit over the years, lived out of the country whenever I could and as often as I could, and had that freedom from my parents. As long as I could get to them in 24 hours, I had the freedom to go wherever I wanted to go. And that allowed me to do the things I've done. So you heard the bio, so I don't need to repeat that stuff. But it is that freedom, and my parents, whenever I'd come back from living in a different part of the country or doing some assignment that I thought, how am I gonna do that? They would always say to me, what's next? When you have that kind of support where people are always saying, don't stop, go to the next level, go to the next level, that's invaluable. And so I love them. They're no longer here with me, physically, but that has been my passport to move about the world.
And that's so important, especially in the Black community, because it's not just your parents, it's your extended family.
Everyone.
Yeah.
It's everyone. And let me just say this. I grew up at a time when the first time I ever heard anything that was not positive, I was in high school. Everything around me growing up in Alabama, that whole it takes a village, I had a village, still have a village. And in fact, I rang the closing bell yesterday. The people at the University of Alabama, I went to engineering school, the people at the business school posted the video. This morning, it had already had 1,500 views. That is the kind of support system that I grew up with and I still have. And yes, it's very invaluable.
So speaking of support systems, tell us about the National Black MBA Association. Tell us a little bit about the history and, about the support system.
Okay. So this organization, we're turning 50 years old this year. And let's clap it, okay? We're turning 50. We were founded 50 years ago by a group of students at the University of Chicago who had all gone to work in fabulous organizations, came back to get their MBAs, and they looked around and they said, when we leave this place, we're gonna be onesie-twosies out in corporate America, and we need to have a formalized way of supporting each other. And they founded this organization on 4 tenets: entrepreneurship, corporate America, because they knew a lot of people go work in corporations, start your own enterprise, lead someone else's enterprise, and community. The 4th one escapes me, but I'll think of it later. But the point of it is, they wanted to do this and started out doing this 50 years ago to put that support system in place and to have a place where those Black MBAs could come back to get together as a group and come back annually and make sure that they were engaging in professional development that they did for themselves in addition to what their companies were doing. That's how we started. We're still doing that. I like to say that we're in the dream fulfillment business. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Our mission is to lead in the creation of education, wealth building, and growth opportunities for Black leaders throughout their careers as professionals, entrepreneurs, and students. We're covering the spectrum from entry to executive and providing that support today through our 39 chapters throughout the nation who are actively engaged with students from 9th grade to 12th grade, getting them interested in business. It's called our Leaders of Tomorrow program. So they operate those programs throughout the nation. And then when people make their commitment to go to undergraduate school and major in business, or even when they are pursuing their MBA or other business-related professional degrees, we are there with them along the way, establishing a relationship, letting them know that it is not only the pursuit of education, but it's the ability to give back to the community, to choose if you want to start your own enterprise or go manage and lead in someone else's enterprise. And then it is also about making sure that the opportunities and access is there for others who come behind you.
So that's some of the pipeline that was referred to in the earlier talks. That pipeline where there's always someone behind the next person, or there's always a few people behind the next person who gets elevated and moves up to the C-suite. Now, speaking of the C-suite, you do have programs for high-level executives at the National Black MBA Association, right?
Yes, in fact, quite a few of our members are actually what we called experienced professionals. And so when people come and engage with us, it is not people just at the entry point of their career. It is also people stay with us along the way. So that's why I talked about from entry to executive. And companies are coming to us as well, finding people who have 10 plus years of experience because they're looking at filling their senior ranks. If you can't grow and develop people at a fast enough rate, then you need to go find them and bring them into your organization. We are a place where people come. Companies are coming looking for experienced hires. And when we have our annual conference, we have over 170 companies coming, hiring not only people new to industry, but also the experienced hires. So if you're looking for an opportunity, senior manager, officer, major enterprises, if you're not a member of our organization, you need to join.
So let's jump right into our conversation on the state of corporate diversity specific to Black professionals. Where are we? What is it?
And let me say this. We were started by Black students, for Black students, as a way to have those opportunities. If you were to come to our conference today, our conference floor in terms of the people who come to our conference or to our career exhibition, which let me do a shameless plug, it is the largest conference career fair for diverse industries looking for Black leaders. We are unapologetically focused on getting Black leaders into corporate America and into entrepreneurship. So, what was your question again? Because I just had to do that shameless plug, and
The state of diversity in corporate America right now, specifically as it deals with Black professionals.
Okay. And let me say this. When I joined Dow Chemical back in 1980, so you could probably do the math, that was when a study came out that was called Workforce 2020. Here I am sitting here, having started my career in 1980, now I'm sitting here in 2020. That body of work, for those of you who are about my age, will remember, that was a body of work that talked about what women would look like in the workforce by the year 2020. That futuristic study is alive and well. Women have made a lot of strides in industry. Blacks, not as much. And why am I saying that? It is because it is not just the presence of African Americans or Blacks in corporate America. It is where are we within the ranks? What is the critical mass? What is the trajectory? I call it Black career mobility. Are we moving at a faster clip than others? Are we moving at a slower clip than others? When you look at the various factors, we have a lot to celebrate because a lot has been done, but we still have much more to do. So I feel that the state of diversity as it relates to Black Americans in corporate America It's a little about like Groundhog Day. We've been here before, and we keep going around the track. We've got to get off the track. We need to have a virtuous cycle and not a vicious cycle or staying where we are. And I do have some thoughts about how we can do that.
So we all know the problem. We could have an entire session
Absolutely.
about what the problem is, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about solutions, as you said, because it's not for lack of effort, it's for lack of results that we see. So talk to us about fixing the problem.
Okay, I'm a true believer in leadership. You lead people, you manage work. I have yet to meet and have, when I worked at McKinsey, did a lot of work with a lot of different corporations, but I have yet to meet any CEO who still has his or her job who did not achieve their objectives, their business objectives. They don't exist. They're taken out if they don't achieve their objectives. So why is it, if diversity is truly a business objective, why is it that they can't achieve that? So here's my theory. We do what we value. When we value things, we make them happen. Now, there's research out there that speaks to the value of Black leadership, Black representation in businesses, Blacks on boards, Blacks everywhere. In fact, business, what is the most positive thing in business? Black. If you're in the Black, you're positive. Let's take that as a theme, right? So, if leaders can make other things happen and they value those things, then we've got to work on the value system of the leaders and help them. And I think the key to doing that is proximity. When people are close to other people and they get to know them, there's a lot of stuff that comes from that proximity. And it's not necessarily that we've got to be engaged in a conversation. But when people are close to me, or when I've been close, like the guy who headed up the Olympics in Atlanta, Billy Payne didn't know me, but in working with me or being in my proximity, he got to see the rock star. He got to see how I operated. And so based on that proximity, then he started allowing and asking me things and providing opportunities that had we not been in each other's presence, it wasn't going to happen. So part of the fix, I think, is proximity. We've got to get people closer to people. And how do you do that? When I go in and work with companies and talk with them, I find out about the DNA of the organization. I don't want to talk with you about what your policies are. I want to know. Talk to me about the people who were promoted recently. Talk to me about the person who was just given an assignment. And it may not have been a promotion. I said an assignment. People are oftentimes given enterprise assignments to work on a project that's, about the future of the organization or about the profitability of a particular project or some innovation that the company wants to invest in. I want to know, how did that person get assigned? How did you find out about that person? Because when you start tracing how companies or how people make decisions about where they're going to place people and what opportunities they're going to give them, it's not about what's the formal process. It's about understanding that informal process, and then you want to get people plugged into that. That's the vein that you want to tap into. And oftentimes, those are not the conversations we're having. So I'd say to you, if you work for an enterprise, I want you to go back and pull the latest press releases about people who are assigned on projects or who just got assigned to go do something. And then look back through their backgrounds and understand, who did they work for? What assignments, what divisions, what geographies, all of those types of things. And start putting together what is the mobility path within your own enterprise. And then look at that path and say, and how many of the people on that path look like me? And if the answer is none or very few, then that is the beginning of the fierce and hard conversation that you need to have in your own enterprise. And I have yet to meet a CEO, senior management, not the neutralizers in between, The senior managers, if you can get close to them and have those conversations, you will be calling me and telling me that the uptick occurred. Senior management gets it. The neutralizers, not so much. So find a place to engage with the people who are leading your enterprise and have those conversations. We have to bridge. No one else is bridging for us. We've got to make it happen, guys.
So I want to also talk about C-suite responsibility, because we do have people in the room and we do have people watching and listening who are in the C-suite, and they have the power and the responsibility. And then I also want to talk about board responsibility, which was touched on before. Boards have a lot of power now, and they have responsibility.
Yes.
What needs to be done to push them? What can be done? What's not being done?
So one of the things is, and I found this throughout my career, is that I'm one of those people, I'll pick up the phone and call folks. Board members have a responsibility to the enterprise. If you work for the enterprise, if you're a shareholder, whatever, that's their responsibility to be responsive to you. The question is, how forward are we in advancing the cause? So when you start engaging with people around these conversations, around what needs to be done, what hasn't been done, I think you're going to find, just like I said, the CEOs will talk to you, or the senior managers or senior partners in an enterprise. You'll find that the board people will do the same. Some of these conversations are not happening because we are no longer fearless in engaging in the conversation. And sometimes our conversations are more about me, my, and I versus the collective. And I think maybe there's a balance to round out the conversation. But board members, and you heard people on the stage earlier today talk about, as a board member, what their responsibilities are. Let's hold them responsible for those responsibilities and have those conversations with them. So you can do it as an employee, you can do it as a stakeholder, you can do it as an investor. It doesn't matter. Those conversations can be had. As it relates to the leadership of the enterprise, it's the same thing. You know, sometimes we get into those conversations and we want to appear to talk about the business and the profitability of a particular division, when in actuality, the elephant in the room is the fact that people aren't present in the room. Let's have that conversation. If you don't know how to have them, again, join the National Black MBA Association, and we can help you understand how to have those conversations with the people within your own organizations. But I would say this, I'm a big believer in learning from others, the progress that has been made. At one point, diversity, I used to say it was a 4-letter word, because before diversity, when anybody talked about it, folks said what? It was about black people. How did diversity get co-opted? And then the gains for women and the gains for other people. And the people who were there first are the ones who've had the least sustainable progress. That's why I'm being very clear. It's not about progress, it's about sustainable progress. And so we have to re-engage, because otherwise we look like the ones who are complaining about things haven't happened versus continuing to take up the mantle and make sure that things do happen. So we've got to re-engage and hold people accountable. Boards have metrics around profitability, they have metrics around growth. Ask, where's the metric around Black career mobility? If you're not measuring it, you're not going to get it. If you don't value it, it's not going to happen. And if it's not happening, it is our responsibility collectively to make it so. We're here to help do that. People are coming to us looking for talent. We're having those conversations, not only about how to find talent, but we want to see the talent progress and progress at a faster clip, because we don't have another 50 years for progress. We need to see things happening now. And I would tell you this, if your enterprise goes out and it brings a person from the outside into your enterprise, please do not reject that organ. Please do not reject that organ. Reach out, help, make them comfortable, engage, and find an ally in them to continue to push for more people. Companies can't If they haven't developed enough talent already, they're gonna have to go out and bring talent in. But it's gotta be a both and. It can't be suppress people who are there and just look for new talent. But if you reject the talent that is being brought in, I don't think you need me to tell you what the so what will be to that. But engage people when they come into your space, challenge the leadership, and continue to press the cause for Black career mobility and for Black progression on boards, in senior management, and I'm not talking about the onesie twosies, because when they retire, we start back. It's Groundhog Day all over again. We've got to have enough people where the ranks are not depleted.
And one of the ways to press and to ask for metrics and possibly to get them is through ERGs. So employee resource groups, these groups like Globe, that's our hosts here at the NASDAQ, they can move the needle. They can get things done. They can make change. They are important. And if they're not moving the needle, if they're not making change, they're still important, because when employees or even when candidates come into companies, right, they want to know that they exist for them, that there is a resource there, that companies do take this seriously. So there could be a resource, a place for employees who are Black to go and have other Black employees to talk to support them, their work family. So let's talk about employee resource groups.
So about 20 years ago, I had my own firm at the time, and I did a lot of strategy consulting work, and a local firm, large company in Atlanta, invited me in. I'd work with the person who was heading up, he was a diversity inclusion person, and he brought me in, and he said he wanted me to do diversity strategy. And I said, I've never done a diversity strategy. Why are you asking me to do it? He said, well, all the work I've seen you do at Coke and other places, you always made sure that it was tied to the business strategy. That's why I'm asking you to do it. And I said, that would be the only way I do it. So we started out with the business strategy, and everything that we talked about was about moving the needle on the business. So we did that work, and then we stepped back and said, that's good, but that's not enough. And then he said, I want to have you work with the ERGs. And at this time, the company was introducing the LGBTQ, now X as well, ERG. They were introducing the Latino ERG, and the Black or African American ERG was, as always, the granddaddy.
Because everybody wants a piece of the pie.
Exactly. And so when I started working with the ERGs, remember the diversity strategy was very business centric and saying this is how this would help the business move the needle on profitability and everything else that was in the strategy. So when we start looking at the ERGs that were the new ones, they came in gangbusters, and they were across every aspect of the business. That's where they started. And so I went in and worked with the African American ERG to do the same. It was about the consumer. It was about marketing. It was about the brand. Where does it show up? It was every facet of the business. But that was a heavier haul because the ERG that was there was more focused internally and inward about their own progression and having more of an HR focus versus having a business focus. And what I said to them was, let's go business and HR. But if you're solely focusing on the talent aspect, you're not allowing the enterprise to market and recognize consumers and show this as a place where other people will want to come and work. Because when people are not seeing you progress, they're not going to come there. And when they then started focusing on the consumer segments and making sure that the marketing of the organization, the people who were in the commercials look like them as well as other customers, they started seeing a change in how that ERG was perceived by the enterprise, and it then claimed its rightful place above the other ERGs. And when I say it's a rightful place, it had been there longer, it had made strides, but it had not penetrated all aspects of the business. So I think ERGs have a role to play in educating the whole of the enterprise about how we look to the outside as it relates to who's in our ads, who's our voice, who's representing the enterprise, and not only as it relates to business, but also in the community. It is one thing for people to sit on boards. It's another thing for public boards, but it's another thing for people to sit on nonprofit boards and represent your enterprise. And start there, because wherever companies send their people, their dollars follow. And that's a way to have an impact in your community where you live, work, and serve, is to have your company show up through you as well. So ERGs can change the business, and ERGs can change how the community views your company based on how you show up in all those aspects.
So the final component to corporate diversity could be government impact. And in a way, that boils down to policy, which is a way to drive behavioral change. So California has a new law that if your board has X number of members, X number have to be women. There's a certain formula. I won't get into the details because, as I said, it's formulaic, but that is one law. Then somebody mentioned in an earlier panel about our Financial Services Committee in Congress and how there are Black members, and should we be using that as a vehicle to drive change? So let's talk a little bit about government policy and how that pertains to diversity.
I think policy is definitely a starting point for change. Policy or incentives or whatever that are part of policy, whether it's local or federal government, that has always been used to drive behaviors in business. And so I was very clear, what you value is what you change or what you do, and policy is one of those. You can call it a hammer or you can call it a carrot, or a stick or a carrot, doesn't matter. But policy is oftentimes used to drive behavior. So if we need to have policies change within an organization or policies change at the governmental level, we need to understand those policy implications. Everybody in here probably knows about redlining, right? Mm-hmm. Redlining is policy. If you want to change redlining, you got to change the policy. It's not about changing the personnel. You could get new people into those institutions, but if the policies have baked in things that need to be changed, we got to change the policy as well as the people. So I think public-private partnerships, I think business and governmental policy are truly the levers that need to be changed and activated to get what we want to see as it relates to Black diversity. The optics matter. You can see me coming. I'm a Black woman. What you can't see coming is a Harvard MBA, chemical engineering, blah, 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 all of that other stuff. So I'm going to go with optical diversity first. If companies can say there's a formula for women on a board, where's the formula for Blacks? Guys, it can happen. And it happens in statements like that. Our new policy is X. There are some people who will be compliant and do it. There are other people who are going to have to be convinced or cajoled to do it. Doesn't matter. The fact is, the policy statement has been made by the leader of the organization that we will not take your company public if you don't have board representation that looks like X. How powerful is that? And it made headlines from New York to California, from Chicago, even on down to Alabama. It is that type of boldness and innovation that is needed. And if we're not expecting that, we're not going to see the changes that we want, because we need that level of boldness to advance Black representation on boards, in C-suites, in senior management, in middle management, in entry positions, in college, in high schools. Have I left out anything? That is the pipeline. I'm a chemical engineer. I walk pipelines. I design pipelines. And I know that if you don't have a pipeline, you are not going to have a sustainable supply of possibilities and opportunity.
And with that, I think we are going to take questions. I have a question in the back here, and we're going to send the microphones around.
Hello, Victoria Jen Rodriguez. Can you elaborate more on how you were able to tie the ERGs or the diversity initiatives to the business outside of the example you gave of the commercial and having people that look and talk like them in the marketing scene? What are some other innovative ways that you were able to make that connection? And once you were able to make the connection, how did you sell it?
Okay. So one of the ways to make the connection is, so I love strategy, so I read business strategy. And what I tell people is that that is probably the gold mine that most people don't ever enter in their own company. They don't read the strategy document. Because if you really read the strategy document and you understand what the strategic imperatives are, what the metrics are, what the goals are, and what the timeline is, then you can take that and find the connections that the ERG can tie to. And when you play that back to the people who drafted it, what are they going to say? I don't agree with it? That's their document. That's what they proposed to the board and said, we're going to go forth and do this. So the tie was, I read the strategy and I helped those groups understand how they could make those tie-ins. So for some of them, that was the first time they had read that document in depth as a source of opportunity to make change. So that's the first step, that power. The second one was, I didn't sell it in. That process of having people read it and look for the opportunity to make the tie-in, that is what empowered them. They took that message in, not me. It was about them going through that process, seeing and believing, and knowing that if I talk to my CEO or the senior executive team or the leadership team, whatever you call it in your enterprise, and I share back to them what they've said is important to the business and how we can move the needle, I've never met a business person who wasn't interested in a business proposition.
Okay, so everyone knows that Kay consults for McKinsey. She gets paid the big bucks to do it. Now is your chance to ask her questions and not have to pay for it. So please, let's get the hands raised so we can time and get the microphone around. Anybody on this side? I know we got one over here. I know. Anybody on this side so we can get the microphone over here?
Hello.
All right.
Yes.
I am also a member of MNN. All right, my studio is on 59th Street.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you, what is, in your opinion and experience, what is the difference between a successful black business owner and an unsuccessful black business owner?
That's an interesting question. I think that, first of all, there's no such thing as unsuccessful. I think that if you are not being successful, it's because you're not learning from the things that didn't work. Because we all experience failures. And I love failure. I love that. Fail, 4-letter word, fail fast. But the fact that if someone is not successful, whatever you're measuring that by, I'd like to know why. And let me just answer that in this way. There was a friend of mine who did a study when he was in business school. He was in undergraduate business school, and they had to go work at a company. He chose this little local market that a man had a little corner store, and the guy came every day to the corner store, and he and his friends played dominoes. And when kids would come in to buy candy, he'd tell them to get the candy you want and put the money on the counter. So my friend comes in, looks at this, and he does this, wonderful study about all the things this guy should do to his store to become more profitable. And when he made his presentation, the guy listened to it and he said, "You don't understand me, do you?" He said, "I come here every day to spend time with my friends and have time away from my wife." So that's what I said. You'd have to understand how you're measuring success, because sometimes people have different objectives, but businesses that are successful tend to learn not only from themselves, but they look and they will borrow, they will steal, go ask people what they're doing, tell me what you learned, how did you do that? It is a hunger and a thirst that people have who are successful. And if someone doesn't have that, then maybe they're unsuccessful, but that's not a word I use really. Oh,
Okay.
over here.
My
And
name is
then over here
Des.
next.
This question is for Ms. Wallace or Mrs. Wallace. Do you think diversity is actually hurting the black community in business or different aspect? Because it seems like every time I keep hearing the word diversity, but I'm trying to ask people, can you really define that for me? Like, because sometimes I say, why can't you just say, okay, do something specifically for black people in general instead of diversity? I just don't get it sometimes. I just wanted to get your opinion on that.
So the question, I think, if I'm hearing it correctly, is that sort of the use of the word diversity. Is that hurting, I'd say, the cause for blacks in business? As I said earlier, I think at one point diversity was when it was only pretty much about blacks. People viewed it as a four-letter word. They didn't want to use it, and when you said it, you didn't know what people were perceiving from the word. I look at it, and one of the reasons why I'm so happy to be the leader of our organization is we're unapologetically, we were started National Black MBA. And there are people who say, well, why don't you guys change your name? And I say, why? Our work isn't done. We'll change our name when our work is done. So, sometimes I think we have to make sure that we get behind words and understand the meaning of the word and how it translates to other people, so that then we're not just dealing with how people perceive a word, but I call it the double click. Tell me what you mean when you say diversity. Tell me what you mean by that. Having that conversation might help you understand that there are some folks, when they hear diversity, they don't hear you at all. It may be about women. It may be about Asian men. It may be about Asian women. It doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It's just that if you don't ask that question, you'll never know what diversity truly means. So engage in the conversation. Don't make an assumption.
We had a question over here, and then the microphone goes over there next, please.
Question for Kay with regard to building those bridges. You just said we have to build those bridges and start to make those connections, whether with senior leadership or the boards themselves directly to hold them accountable. What are some strategies that you think that the entire employee populations of corporations should utilize to do that?
So the question is around building the bridges and what are some strategies to do that. One I talked about earlier is about knowing the business strategy. You need to know what it is that they are trying to accomplish so that you can engage in the conversation with that as a starting point. I understand one of our objectives is X. It might be sustainability. If the company is big on sustainability, then you can pivot to sustainability of or retention of our employees or progression of our employees. It is take the tenets of the business and of the strategy and use that. And then I talked about proximity. You got to be where they are. How can you get to them? Do you know where the audience is? Do you know where your CEO is? Where's Waldo? Where is he? Where is she? Go to where they are. If they're serving on the board of the United Way and they're at a fundraiser, where should you be? At the fundraiser.
If they're on the golf course,
If they're on the golf course,
learn to play golf.
learn to play golf. If they are at a homeless shelter, if they are building a home for Habitat, I tell you, when
Volunteer.
you're slinging that hammer, you can talk a lot about things that matter. So it is about taking that level of innovation to go where people are and to be there. Because if you're not going to be sitting across the table from them in the boardroom or in a conference room, then you're going to have to find another place to intercept them.
Let me just say there's going to be one last question. I think there's a microphone over on that side. So whoever takes the next question on that side, that has to be the last question for time.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
I'm Kay. My question is, I love everything that you're talking about and the way that you're expressing yourself. Can you describe how was it for you just being your authentic self? I mean, because the way that you're talking, you're very just yourself. You're not kind of catering to your audience. I guess think you kind of understand what I'm trying to ask you, versus, having to, adjust to your environment. Like, how have you overcome those challenges in your career?
Well, first of all, let me say, when I decided to go the route of engineering and management, I was a student of business. My friends were reading comic books. I was reading Fortune and Forbes and things like that. And I was reading them when I didn't even understand the concept. Because guess what? The repetition of that. And then I could start understanding, how business was conducted and who the major players were. And I had my boards, the mobility boards that I was talking about. I could tell you people who had worked at different companies and where they had gone and all of that. And it didn't matter, black or white, pink or green at that point. I just wanted to understand business. And I studied it. And that connection for me is what allowed me to therefore work at a McKinsey, because at McKinsey, you have to understand business, because one day you're at an airline, the next day you're at a pharmaceutical company, the next day you're at an automotive company. And it's not about what you're making, it is about understanding business concepts. And so part of it is I'm at ease with that. So now I can have the other conversations as well. But I had these wonderful parents who were not only good at raising 8 children, but they were good at making sure that critical thinking, the ability to express yourself, that's why I can have a conversation with one person and I can hear the conversation over there and can butt in, because they taught us how to listen on multiple fronts. They could hear around corners. But it is all of these other skills that you have to bring to the table. And once you are comfortable with you, other people can be comfortable with you. When you're not comfortable with yourself, you send that muddled message to other people. So first, get comfortable with you. Understand what your gifts are. And if a major component of your life is not giving back to other people, you will always be limited in what you can do. And so I know it's the last question, but I want to pivot to something that I want to say to everybody in this room. For anyone who is interested in business, if you're interested in business today, and I think you are because you're in this room, go find a young person and connect with them and help them make connections about business. Help them develop the understanding of the language and the phrases. Because if you are in business and you're not speaking the language of business, you're not at the right table. Help them understand those principles, understand why data analytics is important. Help them understand the trends that are happening in business, AI. Help them understand why people with a liberal arts background can run an enterprise. Help them make those connections, because what we're finding out is that even though Black students are entering into business at university, oftentimes their inability to make those connections and see how it relates to the real world is what causes them to change their major or give up. But we can help them make those connections. So if you want one thing to do, if I can task you with another thing to do other than reading your business strategy and intercepting your CEO somewhere, it is to make that connection, because that's what will help us build a community and let people see your authentic self. Let them get to know you and the diversity among us. We are not a monolith. We represent diversity, truly, in a lot of aspects. But oftentimes we try to show up in a way that we think is a way people want to see us. Let them see your light. Let them see you. You will be the change, and the change will happen once you're comfortable with that. I guarantee it. Thank you. Thank you.
Wallace from the National Black MBA Association, and Julie Walker, correspondent from the Associated Press. Thank you so much for this final wrapping up of today's program. This was a really great conversation. As a matter of fact, we, as you know, NASDAQ, we've got involved with the New York National MBA Association. In DC, I joined. Matter of fact, we did the New York thing. I said, okay,
Mr.
let me
DC?
go online in DC where I'm located. I joined that chapter.
Wonderful.
We recently hosted a meeting at our NASDAQ offices in DC of that chapter. And there's so much talent that runs across our community in so many areas. And the issue of having the opportunity to connect that talent across people, because you find how often you can help each other. You're trying to do something. I recently actually just finished a Harvard class on entrepreneurship, and one thing they talked about was what? People, opportunity, context, and the deals in creating a new venture. And like I said, the people part is so critical. Who you surround yourself with and who you're able to work with. So this has been a great day for us here at Globe. An interesting thing, something like this, as you know, takes so much time and effort to put on. And the interesting thing with doing this, those of us who are members of Globe or who are involved, this is what they call a true labor of love. Because we have our regular jobs. Nobody's paid to be a member or to head up a program at Globe. You got to do what you do. You got to be in the middle of a Globe meeting and then go take a phone call about whatever issues, things that you're working on. So I'm greatly appreciative of the people who helped to put this together today. And I'm going to call out particularly, starting with Teresa Evans. Who, when we were on the phone call, myself and Brandon are the co-leads of Globe, Brandon Jones, and we said, look, I don't know if I got time to put on a Black History Month event. Who's going to volunteer for this? Teresa was the first one to, on the phone, put her hand up, knowing this was a big event. So thank you very much, personally. Thank you very much. Janet Shenshell. Who fortunately is down in the D.C. office from time to time. So every time she's in the D.C. office, I say, Janet, come in here, tell me what's going on. Amma Anneman, one of our new employees in our legal group. And Chanel Farrago, who I didn't know existed until a little while ago. But she's now our contact in San Francisco. We certainly want to thank our executive sponsors, Michael Potasnik, our CFO, and Walt Smith, our SVP out of Philadelphia. I also want to make sure that I thank, we had, before the program that most of you see, we had an internal program that started last night. And that was put together by another group of NASDAQ Globe members. Shari Bradford, Dawn Stepp, Tiffany Ocasio, and Lisa Johnson. And I certainly want to thank the New York chapter, the Vice President of Operations, Chuck Roberts, and President of the New York chapter, Andrew Hamilton. And just before I ask them to come up and say a few words, I also want to thank someone who always never says they're looking for thanks. So they just do the work not only with us, but of all the affinity chapters, and that is Supriya Jha. There's Supriya. She ducked out somewhere. I mean, she works with all of us. She's constantly bringing up ideas. She's constantly, can you guys do this? I just met this one who does this. This one could do this. Maybe you could help do this. And sometimes we're like, Supriya, I got to do my job. But she's always really looking out for each of the groups and trying to make this a successful event. And, we certainly have to thank, I mentioned Michael, our CFO, but a lot of this is moving forward this way because of our CEO, Adena Friedman, who took over 3 years ago, and has put people and financial resources behind what the resource groups are doing, and that's what matters. So at this point, I'm going to ask Andrew Hamilton to come up and say a few words.
Oh, wow. Always get a tough job is the last one between your food and your drinks and long days, so I'm trying to make this brief and quick. So this year is a leap year, and I always hear about people saying, I don't have enough time to do this, I don't have time to do that, I run out of time. So this year is one more day. one more day for you to be great, one more day to be impossibly partnering with your fellow human beings. And this company, NASDAQ, has given us an opportunity, the National Black MBA, this chapter, an opportunity to be great. And it is a shining example of when someone leans in and they're able to see magic happen. So I want to just say a heartfelt thank you to this organization. I know there's other organizations in this room as well. If you take the chance on us, we could do really great things. If you don't take the chance on us, that's okay. But again, you know, we all have an obligation to do our very best in this world, and hopefully that our children can look forward to our legacy of greatness. Thank you. Have a wonderful Black History Month. Thanks.
The rest is the reception, so enjoy yourselves. You can step over there by the reception area, and we hope you had a great time.
Me feel like maybe I am somebody. I can deal with the bad nights when I'm with my baby.
Hello. One thing, I just want attention of the Globe members. They just want to take a quick photo. So if the Globe members could just come up from NASDAQ up here so we can take a quick photo. Thank you.